The off-season conversations around the Los Angeles Lakers are already heating up, and there are several important decisions that could shape the direction of the team moving forward. While a lot of attention is always placed on the biggest names, the reality is that championships are often decided by the strength of the rotation, the role players, and the flexibility a team has with contracts and roster construction. That is exactly where the Lakers find themselves right now, looking at key players who could either remain part of the project or move on, depending on how the front office decides to manage the salary cap and future roster moves. There are a few names that continue to appear in discussions about the upcoming offseason, and these are players who may not always dominate headlines but play important roles within the system. The Lakers seem focused on maintaining continuity in certain areas while also keeping financial flexibility for potential bigger moves. That balance between keeping useful players and still having room to improve the roster is always one of the hardest parts of building a contender in the modern league. Teams cannot simply keep everyone, and every contract decision has consequences for future seasons. One of the players who appears to be a relatively straightforward situation is Jackson Hayes. Over time, he has shown improvement and has gradually carved out his role on the team. From a roster construction perspective, he fits into a category that many teams value: an athletic big man who can provide energy, rim running, and depth in the front court without necessarily demanding a massive contract. Players like that are often kept not only for their on-court contribution, but also because their contracts can be useful in future trades as salary matching pieces. That kind of flexibility matters a lot when teams are trying to make moves at the trade deadline or during the offseason. Because of that, it would not be surprising if the Lakers offered him another short-term deal, possibly with a slight salary increase as a way to reward development and maintain a positive relationship with the player. These types of contracts can be beneficial for both sides. The player gets financial security and recognition for improvement, while the team keeps a useful rotation player on a movable contract that does not damage long-term cap flexibility. It is a strategy that many competitive teams use when managing their bench and secondary rotation pieces. The more complicated discussions begin when looking at the wing and guard positions, especially when talking about players who contribute in multiple areas of the game. This is where the Lakers will likely spend more time evaluating value versus cost. Shooting, playmaking, and versatility are extremely valuable skills in today's game, and players who can space the floor while also making decisions with the ball tend to be highly sought after across the league. That means contracts for these types of players can rise quickly, and teams must decide how much they are willing to invest. From a team-building perspective, shooting is always one of the most important elements around star players. When you have stars who command defensive attention, surrounding them with reliable shooters and smart decision-makers becomes essential. That is why players who can shoot consistently from long distance, while also contributing in other areas, often become priorities in roster planning. They help spacing, they help ball movement, and they reduce offensive pressure on the main stars. Another important factor in all of these decisions is future cap planning. Teams do not just think about the upcoming season. They think about 2, 3, sometimes 4 years ahead. Structuring contracts in a way that keeps salaries lower in the short term, but higher later, can sometimes help teams remain competitive immediately while preparing for future flexibility. Backloaded contracts, for example, can be used strategically when teams expect the salary cap to rise in future seasons. That way, a contract that looks expensive later may actually be reasonable compared to the new cap environment. This type of long-term planning shows how roster management is not just about talent evaluation, but also financial strategy. A team might like several players and want to keep them all, but the numbers have to work. Every contract affects what the team can do next, whether that is signing another player, making a trade, or extending a star. That is why front offices spend so much time modeling different scenarios and planning multiple paths, depending on how negotiations go. There is also the human side of these decisions. Some players develop strong roles within a team, feel comfortable in the system, and value stability and the chance to compete for championships over simply chasing the highest possible contract elsewhere. When a player feels that a team believes in him, gives him opportunities, and puts him in a position to succeed, That relationship can sometimes lead to contracts that work well for both sides. Those situations are often the ones that help contenders maintain depth year after year, instead of constantly rebuilding their bench and rotation. As the offseason approaches, the Lakers will likely evaluate not only individual performance, but also lineup combinations, long-term potential, and how each player fits into the overall vision of the team. Every decision will be connected, and keeping one player may mean losing another or not having enough financial flexibility to address a different need. That is why these off-season discussions are so important, because the moves made during this period often determine how competitive a team will be once the season begins. As those internal evaluations continue, one of the most delicate situations revolves around how much value to assign to scoring versus all-around impact. It is easy to appreciate a player who can consistently put the ball in the basket, especially in difficult situations where the offense breaks down and someone needs to create a shot. However, in today's game, teams are increasingly prioritizing players who can contribute across multiple areas, even if they're not the primary scoring option. That creates a challenging dilemma when deciding how much to invest in players whose biggest strength is their ability to score. There is no doubt that having a reliable scorer who can operate in the mid-range and knock down perimeter shots has real value. In certain matchups, especially in the postseason, those players can become extremely important when defenses tighten up and transition opportunities become limited. The ability to create a shot in half-court situations is something every contender needs. But at the same time, if that player does not bring consistent defense, rebounding, or playmaking, it forces the rest of the lineup to compensate, and that can limit overall flexibility when building rotations. This is where the Lakers have to be very strategic. They cannot afford to allocate a large portion of their salary cap to players who fill only one dimension of the game, especially when the roster already includes stars who demand both the ball and significant financial resources. Every supporting piece must complement those stars in a way that maximizes efficiency on both ends of the floor. That means prioritizing versatility, effort, and decision-making just as much as raw scoring ability. Another layer to this situation is the emergence of younger players who are pushing for more minutes. Development is a critical part of sustaining success, and when a young player shows potential, the team has to find ways to integrate him into the rotation. That often leads to difficult choices, because giving opportunities to a developing player can come at the expense of a more established veteran. However, if the organization truly believes in that young talent, then creating space for growth becomes necessary, even if it means moving on from a familiar contributor. Rotation balance becomes even more complex when multiple players occupy similar roles on the court. If several wings or forwards require touches in similar areas, it can create redundancy and limit overall effectiveness. Teams at the highest level aim for complementary skill sets rather than overlapping ones. That is why roster decisions are rarely just about individual talent. They are about how each piece fits within the larger puzzle. A player might be productive on his own, but if his strengths do not align with the needs of the team, the fit can become problematic over time. Financially, this is where discipline becomes crucial. It is easy to reward players for past contributions, but the front office must remain focused on future performance and long-term sustainability. Overpaying for sentiment or familiarity can quickly put a team in a difficult position, especially when trying to compete against other contenders with more balanced rosters. Smart teams identify the right price for each player and remain firm, even if it means letting someone walk away. At the same time, there is always the possibility of creative solutions when it comes to contracts. Structuring deals in a way that aligns with both the player's expectations and the team's financial strategy can sometimes keep key pieces in place without sacrificing flexibility. This might include shorter deals, incentive-based structures, or contracts that increase in value over time. These kinds of approaches require careful negotiation, but they can be the difference between maintaining depth and losing valuable contributors. The pressure to get these decisions right is amplified by the expectations surrounding the team. When a franchise is aiming to compete at the highest level, every move is scrutinized and every mistake becomes more costly. Depth, chemistry, and adaptability often separate contenders from the rest, and those qualities are built during the offseason through decisions like these. It is not just about assembling talent, but about creating a roster that can adjust to different matchups, survive injuries, and perform under pressure. Ultimately, the Lakers are entering a phase where precision matters more than ever. The margin for error is small, and the difference between a good roster and a championship-caliber team often comes down to a few key decisions. Identifying which players to prioritize, how much to invest in each one, and how to structure those deals will define the next chapter for the team. And as these conversations continue behind the scenes, every move will carry weight, shaping not only the immediate future, but also the long-term trajectory of the franchise. There's also the competitive landscape to consider, because the decisions made are not happening in isolation. Other teams across the league are evaluating similar situations, looking to strengthen their own rosters and ready to take advantage of any opportunity that appears. If a player reaches the market, there's always the risk that another team sees greater value or offers a more attractive role. That external pressure forces the Lakers to act with both confidence and urgency, making sure they secure the pieces they truly believe in before alternatives disappear. At the same time, continuity has its own value, especially for a team that is trying to build chemistry and consistency. Keeping players who already understand the system, the coaching philosophy, and the expectations inside the locker room can save valuable time when the next season begins. Instead of starting from zero, the team can build on what has already been established. That kind of stability often shows up in small details during games, like defensive rotations, spacing on offense, and overall communication on the floor. However, continuity should never come at the expense of necessary improvement. There are always areas that need to be addressed, whether it is perimeter defense, rebounding, or offensive efficiency in certain lineups. The challenge is identifying which weaknesses can be improved internally and which require external additions. That balance between internal development and roster upgrades is one of the defining aspects of a successful off-season strategy. Another important element is how roles are defined moving forward. Players perform at their best when they have clarity about what is expected of them. If the Lakers decide to keep certain pieces, they must also ensure that those players are placed in positions where their strengths are maximized. That could mean adjusting rotations, redefining responsibilities, or even changing the pace and style of play to better suit the personnel. These adjustments are subtle, but can have a significant impact over the course of a long season. All of these factors combine to create a complex puzzle that the organization must solve in the coming months. Every contract, every roster spot, and every minute on the court has to be carefully considered. The decisions made now will echo throughout the entire season, influencing not only performance, but also flexibility for future moves. And as the front office works through these scenarios, the focus remains clear: build a roster that can compete at the highest level while maintaining the ability to adapt as new challenges arise. Before we continue, we ask that you leave a like and subscribe to the channel so you won't miss any exclusive Lakers updates. Moving on, a fresh wave of intrigue has reportedly emerged from within the Los Angeles Lakers organization, and at the center of it stands none other than LeBron James. According to growing whispers circulating among league insiders, the superstar forward has delivered a firm and highly personal ultimatum to the franchise, one that could dramatically reshape the team's future. Sources suggest that tensions have been quietly building behind closed doors, fueled by uncertainty over the Lakers' potential roster moves. The situation escalated when rumors linked the team to the possible arrival of a high-profile player whose fit, both on and off the court, has reportedly raised concerns within LeBron's inner circle. While no official confirmation has surfaced, the mere possibility appears to have triggered a strong reaction. The alleged message from LeBron is as direct as it is startling. If this specific player joins the Lakers, he would consider leaving the team. For a franchise that has leaned heavily on his leadership and legacy in recent years, such a stance introduces a layer of urgency and risk that cannot be ignored. Around the league, executives and analysts are watching closely. Some believe this could be a strategic move by LeBron to influence front office decisions, reinforcing his role not just as a player, but as a key voice in shaping the roster. Others interpret it as a sign of deeper discord, hinting at fractures that may not be easily repaired. Inside the Lakers organization, silence prevails publicly, but speculation continues to intensify. Balancing the long-term vision of the franchise with the expectations of one of the game's most influential figures is no simple task. The front office now faces a delicate dilemma: pursue a potentially transformative signing or preserve harmony with the player who has been the cornerstone of their recent identity. As the rumor mill spins, one thing becomes clear: this is more than just a routine offseason storyline. It is a high-stakes power play where every decision could echo far beyond the locker room. Stay informed exclusively about Los Angeles Lakers news. Subscribe to our channel and hit the like button to keep receiving daily updates. Also, share your opinion on the news in the comments, as your contribution is crucial for the Lakers. Stay tuned for the next video,